Welcome to the second lecture of Concepts and Planning. In this lecture, we will try to talk about few basic terms related to cities and plans. To start with, it is important to know about the term urban, how we need to explain urban. So in Latin words, urbanus is courteous. This courteous, basically, this is kind of a space we are talking about where every people might not know each other, but they will pay respect to each other. So with this term, we see a linkage of spatial to the social, identifying a certain kind of place with a certain kind of person. The term city comes from the Latin suis, which is basically citizen, a denizen of the city. The term city shares the root of civic, civil, and civilized. To be civil, to be courteous. So, city is a place where people might not know each other, but they will pay respect to each other to exist, to coexist. Then the Greek word for cities was polis. Again, we find similar linkages to the discourse of politeness, but also the idea that code of civility is the city needs to be policed and policy framework should be there. And finally, we talk about the word public. In Latin, publicus meant belonging to the people. So privacy, in contrast, was originally a space of deprivation of those who were deprived of citizenship and the public life. So these are the basic terms. It will eventually will come again and again and again. So it needs to be clarified. But informal definition of urban is characterized by, in four different parameters. So once we call a place urban, we have to think about its population size. We have to think about the density. Then we need to think about economic base, whether it's the agrarian economy or the service sector economy or the manufacturing sector economy. We need to know that. And presence of a municipal regulatory body is important to call a space urban. So basically, in formal technical thinking, urban can be defined based on these four parameters. Therefore, urban area or a city is a system which requires plan to guide the future of the community. Then what is planning? Planning is certainly a process of decision making for future actions, and these actions is required to achieve predetermined objectives by optimum utilization of resources available within a time frame. So planning always deal with a certain time frame. It takes decision for the future. It takes decision on behalf of the people of a city or a region or a locality or a neighborhood. So it can range, the time frame can start from 5 years and it can end in 20 years or even more. So this process is helping us to have a vision for the city, to set some goals, actions, strategies for the city. So urban planning deals with people and their surroundings. This is how built environment influences human behavior and interaction. So city is certainly a place where human is performing or actively performing. So it's a daylighting framework and a system that can share the cities and the life of people within them. But whenever we look at our cities, it is overcrowded. It's constantly people are coming to the cities. So there is a trend of in-migration, and we see as a result of having a lot of people in cities, we see urban sprawl. So spread of development or growth, which is basically uncontrolled or not following the proper plans. So eventually, this is a global phenomenon, and this global phenomenon says by 2050, the world cities will experience 70% of the global population. So certainly urban planning deals with different issues and related to space and people, and it's very complex. Urban planning deals with wicked problems, and it helps to build public infrastructure. It helps to build governance system. So it deals with systems and subsystems. So built environment is a consideration. It also helps to create a place, identity of a place. It also helps to build to create the living environment of a community, respecting mother nature, the environment, respecting the culture. Urban planning always see the big picture of a problem, and it can project, it always analyze, and eventually based on the analysis it take decisions, and it helps to integrate different service sectors, different facilities to the city system to make the system more efficient. It also helps to grow economy of the city, and so on and so forth. So what is the role of planner and architect then? Both these two disciplines are in a collaborative are stand side by side in collaboration. They all thinking about functionality of the city and functionality of a space and the aesthetic of the space. Urban planner focus is a little bit bigger spectrum. For example, land use, they do land use planning for the cities to understand where should be the residential area, where should be the commercial area, where should be the industrial area and the central business district. So they also plan for the city transport networks and systems. Urban planners are also thinking about economic development and what sort of stimulus can help the economy to grow, can create more employment, can create more industrial output from a particular space. Then this discipline also considers urban design as an important element to maintain and design and regulate the public spaces. Planning management and in the system thinking level is also important. Housing is another big component of planners, urban planning areas for the planners. Parks and recreations are also one of the big focus for planners. Uh, they also considers historical preservation, community activism, disaster management in terms of what we call them unprecedented event happening in the cities. They also think about it. Environmental integrity is one of the key things planners do consider, and eventually planners are more into this infrastructure and service sector to design and implement. On the other hand, designers focuses in two layers. They think about in public layers. They also think about in private layers. In public layers, they work in streetscapes, public space, squares, realm, landscape, and connectivity, which is basically seeing a space in terms of imageability, complexity, legibility, human skill development, transparency or clarity, coherence, linkage, and proximity. But in public layer, they design in private layer, they design private space and for individual stakeholders or individual clients. This is one of the big example of seven principle given by architect and planner Peter Calthorpe. He advocated seven principles which can build a better cities. His first point was preserve. He said Mother Nature should be respected in the first hand. Even though we need space for building or expanding our cities, but always geography and topography and geomorphological characteristics should be in the first place of consideration. So in this case, preservation of natural settings, agrarian landscapes, and cultural heritage sites is important. He talks about mix. Basically, he meant about mixed use and mixed income neighborhood to make these neighborhood more efficient, service, consumable, commodities is accessible to the citizens very and they can have very intimate public space around the city core. He also talks about walk. He's advocating designing walkable streets and human skill neighborhood to make spaces more efficient and functional. He talks about biking, considering the public health and well-being system to be in the priority list. Then he talks about connecting different layers of roads and blocks, and this is also part of the development control. So whenever we have defined blocks, we have different layers of accessibility. If these accessibility networks are more flexible and can take a person to different options, then it is important for a neighborhood. Then he talks about riding. Mostly he advocated for public transport, not the private transports. That's why he talked about bus rapid transit, transit-oriented development, pedestrian-oriented development, so on and so forth. Finally, he talked about focus. So every neighborhood or every city should have some identity, and it should consider the density and the mix of transit capacity. So this identity and focus of development is very important to build a better cities. And with this note, I am going to end the second lecture of concepts in planning. Thank you.